So what happens when the government gets it wrong? When a decision they make really messes with your life. Well, it turns out there's a special kind of court designed for exactly that. Today, we're going to break it all down, and we're using Thailand's official legal text to do it. Yeah, most of us think of courts for disputes between people, right? Or maybe companies. But what happens when the entity you have a problem with is the government itself?
Let's make this real. Imagine the government decides to build a factory right next to your home, and they're just ignoring all the environmental laws. What can you actually do? It can feel like you're powerless, like you have no options. But it turns out you do. And that answer is Thailand's administrative courts. This whole system was set up for one specific reason: to handle these exact kinds of disputes, the ones between regular people and the state. The easiest way to think about it is like a special referee in a game. You've got one player, the state, which is obviously super powerful. And if they make a move that seems, well, out of bounds, this court is the one that steps in to blow the whistle. So the first question is, who exactly can you challenge in this court? And to get that answer, we're not going to guess. We're going straight to the source, the actual law. The text is pretty clear, and it all kicks off with this one key term: administrative agency. Okay, so what in the world is an administrative agency? Well, it's pretty much everything you'd think of. We're talking about the big government ministries, departments, state-run companies. Basically, if it's a piece of the government's machinery, it's covered. It's incredibly broad. And here's a really important point. It's not just about the big, faceless organizations. The law also covers any state official. That means you can challenge the actions of individual government employees, too. The takeaway here is huge. Both the institution and the people working inside it can be held accountable. All right, so now we know who you can sue. The next logical question is, for what? What kinds of problems or cases do these courts actually listen to? And again, we don't have to guess. The law is super specific about this. Section 9 pretty much lays out the court's entire playbook, what it has the power to decide on. So let's break down what's in that playbook. There are a few big categories. First, you've got unlawful actions. This is when a government agency does something it wasn't supposed to, like issuing an order that's totally outside its legal power. Then you have the exact opposite, inaction. This is when an agency is supposed to do something but just doesn't. Maybe they're dragging their feet on a permit for no good reason. Then there are cases about wrongful acts, which is basically when an agency or an official causes some kind of damage and should be held responsible. And last but not least, there are disputes over administrative contracts. Those big agreements between a person or a company and a state agency, like for a huge construction project. Okay, so if you're going to go up against the player as powerful as the state, you have to be able to trust the referee, right? So, who are these judges? Who's making the final call here? Well, these are not your average judges. The whole system is built to make sure they're not just impartial, but are actual experts. They aren't generalists. They're specialists who are chosen because they really get the ins and outs of how public administration works. And just to give you a sense of the kind of experience we're talking about, get this. To even be considered for the Supreme Administrative Court, a judge has to be at least 45 years old. Yeah, this is definitely not an entry-level gig. It's a job for seriously seasoned professionals. And the qualifications are just as tough. We're talking about people who might have been a professor of law, a judge on the Supreme Court of Justice, or even a director general in a state agency. The whole idea is to get judges who understand the system from the inside out. And if you want to see the full nitty-gritty list of requirements, it's all laid out right there in Section 13 of the Act. The bar is set incredibly high, and that's completely on purpose. Okay, so you've got a valid case. You've got judges you can trust. What happens next? How does a case actually work? Let's walk through the basic steps. It all kicks off when you file something called a plaint. That's just the official term for your formal complaint. But here's the catch. You have to move fast because the clock is ticking. 90 days. That's it. That's generally the window you have to file your case, starting from the day you found out about the problem, or, reasonably should have found out. And if you miss that 90-day deadline, you could lose your shot completely. And let me be clear, this isn't just a suggestion. It's a hard and fast rule written right into Section 49 of the law. Honestly, it's probably one of the most important details for anyone even thinking about filing a case. So let's say you filed your plaint on time. What happens?
Well, the process gets going, and it basically breaks down into 4 main stages. First, you file the case. Simple enough. Second, a judge in charge gets assigned, and their job is to gather all the facts from both you and the government agency. Third, you get a hearing in front of a panel of judges. And finally, that panel delivers the final judgment.
Which brings us to the biggest question of all, right? The outcome. What happens after the judgment? I mean, what kind of power does this court actually have to make things right? And this is really the whole point of the system. A ruling from the administrative court isn't just some friendly advice. It has real teeth. It is a legally binding order, and government agencies and officials have to follow it.
And the power they have is pretty immense. Just look at Section 72, which says the court can order the revocation of a bylaw or an order. Just think about what that means for a second. The court can literally cancel a government rule or an official order. That is a massive check on state power.
So let's circle all the way back to where we started. Remember that person whose home was threatened by that new factory? What does this all mean for them? It means they are not powerless. It means there is a real, independent, and powerful path to justice. It's a system designed to make sure that everyone plays by the rules, and that includes the government itself.